I'm sorry, I'm going to curse here. And what the fuck is going on right now in Florida?
That sentence could apply every day.
Yes.
Doesn't matter.
What the fuck is going on right now? Welcome to episode 20 of the Left Shew Politics podcast. I'm the host for this episode, Rick Shew. My political partners, Michael and Jeremy, are not able to be with me today, but they're working on a show that they plan on doing soon, so be on the lookout for that. It's always great when those guys do something. With me today is San Francisco Film Critics Circle and new verified critic for Rotten Tomatoes. Is that fair to say?
It is.
Mr. Zaki Hasan. Hey, buddy.
Hi. How's it going?
And congratulations on the Rotten Tomatoes thing, man. That's very cool.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Also joining us is a former local campaign opposition researcher and writer for both Fandango and Movies.com. Our returning guest, Mr. Chris Clow. Chris.
Thank you so much for bringing me back, Rick. I'm glad to be here, especially after Tuesday. We got a lot to talk about.
Oh boy, do we. On that note, let's introduce our last guest and get on with it, because Chris, you are right, sir. We have lots to discuss. Online blogger and recent member of the New York State Senator John Brook re-election campaign, Mr. Eric Holzmann. Eric.
Hello there.
And how did it go for Mr. Brook?
Well, he won. It was a very hotly contested election, but he did win, and I'm glad he won. Spent a lot of time on the campaign, and it was a lot of long hours, a lot of hard work, but he did win, so it was a good result.
That's fantastic. Congratulations, man. And we'll get to more of that in a moment. That's really sort of our key topic here. There's a lot of things we're going to discuss on this episode, guys. And just so everybody knows, we are recording this thing right now. It's Thursday. It is November 8th, 2018 at 9:41 p.m. One of the reasons I'm letting everyone know this, because it might be 24, 48 hours before we go live with the show, and there is no telling what the hell is going to transpire over the next 2 days. This might be such old news that we're about to discuss that it's going to make everybody's head spin. I don't know, but we're about to get into a lot of things in terms of the midterms and what's happening in real time right now as we speak. But I do want to just at the top of the show address something really fast, and it's something could be a show on its own. In fact, we dedicated an entire episode to gun violence. That was episode 17, and Eric, you were my guest on that with the wonderful Rachel Ramey.
Yes, and Michael.
Absolutely, and Mr. Malloy, one of my Left Shoe partners. But we're all very strong proponents for gun control, and I can say this for someone like myself that's from Texas, raised by a cop, and I'm all for the Second Amendment. But the toxic absolutism of that amendment and the NRA stranglehold that they have in our country, it's very literally killing people. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. I'm not trying to be dramatic when I say that. I really do actually believe that. And we're not doing a damn thing about this. And unfortunately, last night in Thousand Oaks, California, I don't know if you guys have been there before that are listening. It's just right outside of LA. And some former Marine who obviously was suffering from some serious issues himself walked into a bar and killed 12 people. One was a police officer, an absolute hero. And obviously the shooter is gone. But there were 12 beautiful souls lost to gun violence once again in America. And it's deflating. It makes me sick. We're all kind of numb to it. It's being talked about today, but it's being talked about like this is day 4 of the incident, not like the day after. And that's not a good thing. And
No.
I know that we're not going to get anything done with guns with this president. But Zaki, feel free to chime in. Of course, I know that you have been a guest on this show several times. We've talked about gun violence. We've interacted about it on social media. And Eric, obviously, you were on the show with me. But Chris, let me ask you, because I've never had you on the record, and quite frankly, I honestly don't really even know where you stand on this. Just do you mind just maybe telling us and our audience here, like, what are your just general thoughts on gun violence, and you want to share any feelings about today?
Let me put it this way. If I were a single issue voter, which I'm not, but if I were, it would be guns. I abhor gun violence. It's the thing that I'm probably the most frustrated about, considering how weirdly permissible it seems to be. And I've never been a victim of gun violence, but just like any other American who turns on the TV, I'm just sick to my stomach every single time this happens. I'm sick of seeing
You're sick
families.
a lot.
Yeah. Oh, you're telling me.
Yeah.
Almost like a hypochondriac. At least that's what my doctor would say. But I mean, it's just, I'm sick of seeing families broken. I'm sick of seeing sons and daughters taken from their parents. I'm sick of seeing parents taken from their children. It's hard to find the words that truly capture just how awful the gun violence epidemic really is in this country. For some reason, we are so addicted to firearms as something that is inextricably linked for some people to the quintessential American experience. I've never felt that way. I get into some pretty interesting debates with my brother, who is the strange breed of a socialist gun nut. And I think he would be okay with me describing him that way, because he's kind of like a Bernie supporter in the sense of the social programs that he believes in, but he also has an arsenal and he doesn't want it taken away from him. And I don't even want to take it away from him, but I definitely, since I know how devoted he has been to using those weapons properly, I want the same kind of training and education for everybody that chooses to pick up a weapon. I don't know if you guys saw recently, there's, on YouTube, you can find all sorts of crazy things. And one of the things that I found recently was just gun bloopers, I think it was called. There was a guy at a range who was taking selfies with his gun. And in the bout of biggest stupidity
I saw
that
this.
I've probably ever seen. Okay, yeah, you know where I'm going with this then.
Yep.
He put the gun that was in his hand to his buddy's head. And good on the guy who was actually at the range, who was working. He jumped in there faster than I can snap my fingers and pushed the gun out of his hands and away from his friend's head. But it's just like, this is the kind of thing that
I saw that. Yeah.
There are people so obsessed with the imagery of guns and the romanticization of guns, but it leads to needless death and suffering. And that is exponentially truer of the people who pick up weapons to specifically do harm to others. I don't think that there is anything wrong, considering the kinds of regulations that we have on people who drive and operate dangerous machinery. A gun is a dangerous machine, especially if it's in the wrong hands. And I see absolutely no reason why there can't be common sense legislation and regulations in place to govern the rules surrounding the way people use their guns.
So very well said.
Guns are one of the political issues that I'm most passionate about by a mile, and that's how I feel.
Zaki, you want add any thoughts to that before we? There's no good way to segue out of this, by the way. I had to at least talk about it and address it, and then we'll have to move on.
I'll just say, as is so often the case, I'll just ditto what Chris said, because he said it far better than I could.
Absolutely. And if you guys want to hear me and Eric's thoughts on that, go to episode 17 of the Left Shew Politics podcast. And it's really depressing, Eric. I was thinking about it today, and I text Rachel also. And that show was 9 months ago. And I think there's been a handful of mass shootings since then, 2 just in the last month.
Yeah.
And that's probably like splitting hairs in terms of the definition of what we want to refer to as a mass shooting. I'm talking about 11 dead and at the synagogue, and then obviously last night. That's just, it's awful. All right. So I'm sorry, Eric, you want to say something real quick or?
No.
Okay. All right. So I will say thoughts and prayers to the families and victims, because I really do mean that. And thoughts and prayers are fine, it doesn't matter what religion you are. You can be an atheist and still send thoughts and prayers. It's good feelings. It's good thoughts. It's humanity. But I am sick of that being all
Yep.
we do.
That I agree with you. Yes.
Thoughts and prayers are great. Legislation is also great, and probably in this case better.
Regular people sending thoughts and prayers is one thing. If that's all that politicians do, that is entirely different.
And on that note, we'll move on because I could not have said that better myself. In fact, I didn't. Okay, so wow, there was a big, again, terrible segue, but we're just going to have to jump into this. So wow, what happened on Tuesday, Zaki? There was something going on Tuesday. Was it like a sale at like 2-for-1 chicken sandwiches at Chick-fil-A or something? What happened? What was going on Tuesday?
Not bad as far as political earthquakes go. I think what we can't undersell what happened on Tuesday. This was the blue wave that we've heard prophesied for the better part of a year and a half.
So it was the midterm elections, obviously, and it was Donald Trump's first as president, hopefully his only one. So
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And you're right. It was a blue wave. And I never said that. I wasn't a cheerleader for people that did, because I always thought we're setting ourselves up. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. And after 2016, I used to bet on elections, like literally, man, $400 or $500 on whatever. It's just like, that was like the gambler in me. I don't even do it anymore. 2016, I was done. And anyway, because it changed everything for me. It made me realize that I can't put my faith in my fellow voter, because they're going to make a lot of really bad decisions. Or in polls. Right. Now, with that said, 2016's national polls were actually on the money, considering that she won the popular vote by 3 million votes. But when you get into the micro of those specific states, obviously that falls apart pretty quickly. But anyway, so Zaki says a blue wave. I agree. It's becoming more of a blue wave. Eric, you are kind of been our go-to guy on this. What happened on Tuesday? And I'm sorry, I'm going to curse here. And what the fuck is going on right now in Florida? and
that sentence could apply every day.
Yes.
Doesn't matter.
What the fuck is going on right now? Are we? I mean, Rick Scott is suing. Donald Trump's calling fraudulent. Marco Rubio's losing his mind. And meanwhile, the races that were called for the Senate and for the governorship, they may not even flip. But anyway, recap Tuesday, then catch us all up. What the hell's going on right now?
So the blue wave everyone's talking about right now, what happened mostly in the House of Representatives, where they gained 30 seats, and there's still 13 races still open that have been uncalled. We'll get to the problems in Florida in a minute. The Republicans, of course, kept control of the Senate. They added to their seats, so they flipped Indiana, Missouri, and North Dakota, and then they won a couple of seats that were open in Tennessee and Utah. So the Democrats did flip Nevada, and there's a Mississippi special election going on, and there's actually a runoff there for, I think it's the second seat. So we have that. In Arizona right now, when I did my research earlier, the Senate race was still too close to call, and the Republican McSally was leading. However, that has changed now. Sinema has taken over for her there. And lastly, of course, now we'll get into the Florida stuff. Rick Scott current Governor Rick Scott was opposing incumbent Senator Bill Nelson. And at the time, it was still too close to call. And now Rick Scott is saying that there's voting fraud going on in Broward and and Palm Beach counties. And he plans on beginning a lawsuit down there. So,
yeah, because we've never seen this movie before in Florida with vote counting, and I can just recall 8 glorious years of President Gore, I might add.
Well, yeah, and the funny thing is, I lived in Florida for 4 years. Not in 2000. I lived in Florida from November 2003 till April of 2008. My first election there was Bush versus Kerry, and I remember using computers for the first time voting there, and I thought they were more better, but maybe not. I mean, it just seems to be that when you see Florida, just expect the worst when it comes to election day. That's it.
Okay, I want to pause for 2 seconds, because I think this is important for context for our listeners. And pardon me as a host for not thinking of this sooner, but we're in the moment. It just kind of hit me. Why don't we all tell our audience where we are at geographically for context here? Okay, so Eric, where do you live?
I live in New York.
Okay. And Chris?
Chicago.
And Zaki?
I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area.
And I am in a suburb 20 miles north of Dallas. And boy, do I have some stories about Texas.
Well, and just to throw it out there too, my heart is in Washington State, so I have some thoughts about that too.
And my heart is also in Chicago because that's my wife's hometown, and New York's my favorite city, and I just love the wine country. So we're all in good company here. All right, so I think that context is important because obviously we're going to talk about some specific things also in our backyards and whatnot. But this is the one of the things that stands out to me, and then Chris, I want to turn this over to you, is just the sheer magnitude of turnout. This was almost on presidential levels in terms of turnout. Really remarkable stuff, almost virtually everywhere. This didn't even feel like a midterm election. This felt like, and I've never seen a sitting president just kind of immerse himself so much in a midterm to maybe even in a weird way give Trump a little credit, I guess, for that. I hate to do that, but he did. He was far more involved than most sitting presidents I can recall in my lifetime for a midterm election. And man, the results are there was a lot of disappointing things that happened that night. Especially here in Texas. And so it took me a couple of days to really understand the magnitude of what did actually happen and what is still unfolding. We're picking up seats as we go along here. So Chris, what was your biggest takeaway? Like, for instance, mine was women, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, but it was like the night for girl power, you know? What about you, man? Like, what was your biggest takeaway?
I think the biggest takeaway that I probably took is just that this is what happens when more people vote. And that's the thing that I've always been passionate about, is actually exercising your right to participate in American representative democracy. And, I can't remember who exactly it was, but there was that video that surfaced, I think in 1980, of a Republican operative who literally spoke into a microphone the words, "I don't want people to vote." Mm-hmm. And I'm paraphrasing the rest of it, but he basically said, because elections don't go the way that we want them to when more people vote.
Right.
So when more people vote, when more people exercise that right, and when they make themselves heard, first of all, you're being true to yourself as an American citizen. If you're allowing yourself to speak for yourself, then no one else can speak for you. So the fact that turnout was up in general everywhere is a very encouraging sign to me. And this was a midterm. So this, I hope in my heart of hearts, leads to record turnout in 2020 when we actually have another general.
I agree. Zaki, why do you think that is? Because everything Chris just said is factually accurate. Why? Why was the turnout so high? Why?
Well, I mean, it's a variety of factors. I mean, I think Trump is the kind of personality that prompts a visceral, counter reaction. And I mean, midterms have traditionally always been a referendum on the person who's holding power. And I think there's been a sense from the beginning that Trump, by virtue of the fact that he got elected while still losing the popular vote, he got elected by stubbornly being anti. Let's just say civilization, I think it's democracy working. It's people, I said this on social media, the founding fathers, the genius of what they did was they built a brake lever into our system, and people were hungry, ready, and willing to grab a hold of that brake lever and give it a good pull.
Yeah, that's perfectly stated. And when you're in San Francisco, right? You could say that you're in a liberal bubble in a sense.
Oh yeah.
But what was your biggest takeaway? What was your biggest takeaway locally? Because obviously, I love you have a new governor, right?
Yeah.
And who is that gentleman?
Gavin Newsom. Yeah, we elected Gavin Newsom. I mean, that wasn't even a contest. He won it in a walk.
Yeah. No, I know it. Yeah, I didn't expect him to really be challenged, but I just love the fact that he ran and he won.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, to me, I look at what Jerry Brown, the exiting governor, has done over the past several years in this state, and I say, this is the example of how to be the anti-Trump. He keeps his head down. He does his job. We don't hear about Governor Brown a lot. We only hear about him in the sense of Governor Brown has been focusing on the state's rainy day fund, on stocking away the surplus, on everything, like on really making California a bastion of what liberal policies, what progressive policies can allow for.
Right.
And we've had a staggering amount of prosperity over the last decade in California. And a lot of that is because of Governor Brown's foresightedness. And the other thing I look at, by the way, is Governor Brown came back in the aftermath of the Schwarzenegger governorship.
Mm-hmm.
And I view this as what will hopefully happen in the country, where, yes, we'll go through Trump. If I were to guess, we'll go through our 2 terms of Trump. But after that happens, we'll be like, I want the guy who's just going to do the job. I don't want to hear about him every day. I don't want to be worried every day.
Not 2 terms, please. Not 2 terms.
I mean,
it might happen.
If I were to guess right at this moment, I would say Trump probably gets reelected. But I guess that's a conversation we can come back to. Certainly, I don't want that. But yeah, I mean, and what's funny, by the way, is that I would gladly take a President Schwarzenegger over our current situation. But I'll tell you, he wasn't great for California.
No, he wasn't great for California. What about anything locally in your neighborhood? Anything at all that's in San Francisco or the Bay Area? That's anything that jumps out at you that was exciting or everything?
Well, I wouldn't say exciting. I mean, it pretty much went the way it was going to go, and that's sort of, people say, "Oh, my vote doesn't count." I guess in a big way, your California Democratic vote doesn't necessarily count.
Right.
You do it out of your civic duty. So, Senator Feinstein got reelected. That's a thing.
Yeah,
that's true.
We need her.
Yeah, but that it tells you something. She was running against another Democrat, and that's what happens here in California.
Well, and you're also Nancy Pelosi is going to be Speaker of the House again as well.
That's right.
That's right.
Exactly right.
All right, Eric. So let's go back around. We're going to come full circle here at the top of the show. We talked about the gentleman you worked for, Mr. Senator John Brook. Come on, brother. What happened? And congratulations again. I'm very proud of you, man. Not everybody knocks on doors, and me, Jeremy, and Michael, the 3 Left Shoe guys, like, we're the real deal. We go out and knock on doors. I mean, we're certainly not perfect people, but we at least walk the walk when it comes to stuff like this. So I appreciate people that do it and do it more than I do, especially because I could do better. So thanks for doing it. So let's talk about it, man. So how does it feel? How does it feel?
Well, it feels good that I was part of something that where the guy won. It's always better when you win, right? So it feels good that I was part of something like that. The takeaway I took from it was the enthusiasm I had with people knocking on the doors, whether I was knocking on a registered Democrat's door, an undeclared, even Republican. You had asked Zaki before why you think the turnout was so high. I just think that President Trump elicits a response on both sides of the line, that people just want to get out and vote, whether you dislike him so much you just want to stop him, or you believe in him and you want to support him. I just think he has that kind of personality. But as part of what I went through here locally on Long Island, it's crazy to think that now I grew up here. So for most of my life, where I live in Nassau County on Long Island has been a Republican stronghold. It's always been in Republican hands. And for the first time in history, Tuesday night, every state senator that was up for election went blue. And it's the first time ever that Nassau County has complete Democratic representation in Albany, which is crazy to even think about.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And I'm going to pause for just a moment. I'm going to pick right back up that with you, but it's crazy, Eric, because it happened everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Pete Sessions, right here in my hometown of Dallas, has held a congressional seat for, 100 years, 32nd congressional district in Dallas. And he lost to a former NFL player, liberal black man, who the guy's awesome, by the way. And Colin Allred, and we won. And right now, the Texas Democrats are kicking ass and taking names. I'll talk more about Beto in a little bit, but what happened here? There's a county not too far from where I'm at. It's Tarrant County. It's closer to Fort Worth. And if anybody's ever been to Dallas, Fort Worth, there is a world of a difference between Dallas and Fort Worth, right? Like, you can be in Dallas for a month and not see a cowboy hat, but you go to Fort Worth, they're everywhere. That's just to kind of paint a picture for you. and Tarrant County is more Fort Worth, and it turned blue. It flipped. I mean, it's not just Tarrant County. It's not just in the Albany area. It's all over the country this happened. So when we talk about a blue wave, it's not just, you don't just look at the governors and the senators and House, and you got to peel back that onion and dig deep and look at the local races. It's nuts. All right, sorry, go pick up where you left off though, where you just said that county that flipped blue.
Yeah, so the county I live in, Nassau County, like I said, it's historically Republican, and the entire state Senate now, representation up in Albany is blue, which is good in a sense because we have Governor Andrew Cuomo, who of course won re-election again, and it wasn't close. Although that I was reading some stuff today about similar to the presidential election, how all the heavy population centers of New York control what happens with the governorship, which makes sense, and how, they're all upset about it. But no, it's just really cool to see, and the demographic here is what is changing, and that's what caused this blue wave. Most of the areas I was campaigning in were heavily minority areas, but even the ones where were traditionally more Republican, I had a lot of good conversation, and it really, really felt good to be a part of, and to see that, people are a little more open-minded than I think we give them credit for, and it definitely worked in this instance. So I don't know. It's just it was really, really cool to be a part of. And I'm glad that he won. And I'm glad that now there's a new voice in this part of New York, which is great.
And how did our Trump supporting fellow Dr. Buddy do in his district? Just tell me it was bad. Dr. Doug, I love you, buddy. But I just tell me it was bad.
He lives in Nassau County where I live. So in the state Senate, and his state Senate representation will be Democrat. So yeah, he didn't do so well.
I want to plug Dr. Frederick, Douglas Frederick, because he's a good sport. He's a Trump supporter, and we did a one-on-one show a year ago. And I wanted to just get on the record that I can talk to a Trump supporter. It was a tough show, but he's a good guy. Anyway, so
he is.
That's all. He is. He's misguided, but he's good. All right, yeah. Chris, a couple of things. One, I know Chicago politics, and Illinois is an interesting state. What anything? Two things with you. Tell us anything homegrown, and then jump right in and talk to us about the ramifications of all this for the Trump presidency. And let's go from there on that.
Yeah, sure. Well, back in 2014, I had only been here for about a year, but I had a hell of a surprise when Illinois elected a Republican governor. I did not expect that from the home state of President Obama. I didn't understand the landscape particularly well when I got here, but I understood it enough for that to surprise me. And Zaki's from here, so I'm sure that, he has perspective. But, the downstate people are generally more conservative than people in the cities, and most definitely Chicago. I mean, Chicago is notorious going back to the 20s for political machines, which was a fascinating thing that I studied in school too. But so this past Tuesday, Governor Bruce Rauner, the Republican incumbent, was defeated by J.B. Pritzker. I was happy to see that because Pritzker is obviously more progressive than Governor Rauner is. Governor Rauner was frankly a disaster for the state of Illinois. We went without a budget for the state for upwards of 3 years, I believe, total. And it was Rauner blaming the Speaker of the House, controlled by a Democrat named Mike Madigan, who's also notorious around this area. And I think he's been around for 30 years. I'm not sure if he's been Speaker of the House for that long, but he's been Speaker for a very long time. Illinois conservatives love to hold him up as a boogeyman, as this guy who's got his fingers in every pie, so to speak. And there might be an element of truth to it, but there was absolutely no excuse that Governor Rauner couldn't have led in actually getting the state budget. A budget was finally approved, but it was over a Rauner veto, and it finally got onto the books. So now that Pritzker is in power, I didn't support Pritzker in the primary. Full disclosure, I supported a far more progressive candidate who's my state senator named Daniel Biss. and he actually gave up his seat to run for governor, so he's not going to be in the state senate anymore, unfortunately. He's a math teacher. He released his tax returns almost instantly and made $30,000 a year, and he was trying to go up against this billionaire behemoth, but at the end of the day, Pritzker's money just won out. He onslaughted the state with ads. In 2014, Rauner outspent Governor Pat Quinn, I think 2-1 in advertising. In this cycle, Pritzker outspent Rauner 3-1. It was billionaire v. billionaire dawn of money. That's the joke that I like to say as a DC.
Was it directed by Zack Snyder? Are we going to get the Snyder cut of that? And we're going. May
as well have been. Although I think I heard that he's going to do a movie adaptation of The Fountainhead next. So we might have to talk about that on the show at some point.
So to our audience listening, we're also all like superhero comic book guys. Yeah. We do podcasts on that. So this is kind of a deep cut. Anyway, continue, sir.
Yeah. So Pritzker is the governor-elect. That's fine. You know, it's preferable to Rauner. It's probably far more preferable to Rauner. But this race was the embodiment of the detriment that big money does to politics in general.
Yeah.
So I'm happy with the result, but I'm certainly not thrilled about the way that the race went down. And it got pretty nasty too. But Rauner was ignoring the polls, and he lost in double digits. He went down hard. So at least there's that. There were a couple of surprises in Illinois. There was a representative. What was her name? I know that her last name is Underwood because I watch House of Cards kind of obsessively too. Lauren Underwood. She's 30 years old, and she unseated a Republican representative in District Number 14. And between her and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York, I mean, it's a very visible kind of progressivism that's pushing forward into the next Congress, which makes me happy to no end. But at the end of the day, Illinois was the bluest part of the blue wave, probably. There were, I think, only 5 Republicans ended up winning in their House races. Everyone else went to the Democrats. We have a new Democratic Attorney General coming, obviously a governor and lieutenant governor. So it was a pretty blue part of the blue wave.
When is the Obama Library supposed to open?
I think it's 2021. I think they're going to break ground soon on the South Side near the U Chicago campus.
This is the first year in many years I actually didn't make it to Chicago. It's not over yet, but it doesn't look like we're going to go. And I know last year when I was there, we didn't get a chance to hook up. We're going to hook up there next year. Okay. Thanks for that insight, man. This is what I love about us kind of identifying where we were locally. I love the local stuff because it's important. And I think a lot of times I try to tell people that, like, who is running for your city council person or your mayor or whoever, it's just as important in your life as your president. I promise you it is. Like, we get wrapped up in the drama and the power and the 24-hour cable news. Turn that shit off every once in a while and just watch your local NBC affiliate and know what's going on in your backyard. All right, Zaki. So Chris talked about nasty politics. It went down the wire and it got really ugly. Great way to transition to Trump. What do you think? Because there was a shitstorm press conference our president gave yesterday. Boy. Unhinged, and then I want to get into the Jim. Forgive me. How is his last name pronounced? Acosta. Thank you. I want to get into that also, but very specifically, Zaki, what does this actually mean for the Trump presidency? Because I'll say this. This is Trumpism and Trumpian of him. Other presidents, you can go back over the years and look at any president that took a beating in their midterms, and they were humbled, and they came out and said, I took a shellacking. We're going to have to reevaluate a few things, whatever, and we're just very presidential and humbled and congratulated the people that won, even though deep down they didn't mean it, but that's not the point. It's what same thing we teach our kids, right? You don't have to like everybody, but you have to be nice. And just basic 101 humanity. Trump doesn't have any of it, man. It's not in his DNA. He comes out defensive. This was great. I loved it. So what? They're going to be the House. I'm going to take one chamber of government and I'm going to use it as a weapon. I'm going to threaten them with the Senate. They come after me. I'm going to go after them. I'm better at this game. blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, Zaki, what is the reality for the Trump presidency right now going into next year when Nancy Pelosi has the gavel again and Adam Schiff has subpoena power?
Well, I mean, the reality is that this is going to be a very different experience for Donald than it has been for the last 2 years, because he's, spent, the first half of his first term sort of considering all of this his fiefdom. He's considered all of Washington D.C. as being, the Trump Tower, and the reality is it's going to smack him like a ton of bricks in January once he realizes that the law is not subservient to the president. And so what we saw yesterday in this press conference was his temper tantrum. He's Veruca Salt. And this is not a president who is able to play things close to the chest. He has no poker face. You can see in the way he acts and the things he says exactly what he's feeling. And by the way, the rest of the world was watching this display too. And you have to imagine that they're looking at it just as bemused / terrified as us, depending on how they feel about the United States. But things are going to get very difficult for him, and the stuff that's unfolding right now vis-a-vis the Attorney General and firing Jeff Sessions, everything else, that's all. He's just digging himself a deeper hole. And I think if we look at the long game that has been played over the last several months by Robert Mueller, I think we'll realize sort of the wisdom that Rod Rosenstein had in appointing him to carry out this investigation. I don't think there's any escape from the tendrils of that investigation, no matter what President Trump tries to do.
I agree with you, and that's another good segue, because Trump woke up on Wednesday and he lost the House and he got his ass kicked in the gubernatorial races and there was a blue wave, period. End of the story. All right. And it's like we said at the top of the show, and it's getting worse because all the things that were still outstanding and other things that are happening in Florida, it's only getting worse for him. But
and Rick, if I can just add one thought,
please go.
What we saw during that press conference was, again, it was the Veruca Salt president. Because what did he do? He read his little list of all the Republicans who lost. Why did they lose? Because they didn't embrace me. And he's reading off this list and mocking them. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, if you're a Republican, how much of this shit do you want to deal with?
How much do you want to deal with? And he's calling out Jeff Flake, who just gave him Justice Kavanaugh at this point. It's Justice Kavanaugh.
And when we carry the ball forward, you say, look at Jeff Sessions. Here's a guy who was literally the first senator to endorse Donald Trump, and Donald Trump has wiped his ass with him from the jump. We're in this weird underground, upside down world now where I'm defending Jeff Sessions, who is not worthy of any defense. However, it tells you something about Donald Trump. For all the things people say about, he values loyalty. No. He values himself. He
values himself. He's a mob boss. I don't think he's a mob boss, because a mob boss actually does value loyalty.
Yeah,
I want to get into this Jeff Sessions thing, and Eric, I want to get your take on this. But before I do, Eric, Zaki, you and I have texted today and talked about this a little bit, and so he comes out with this press conference the day after he gets his ass kicked, pretends like it was all fine and well and no big deal. I'm a badass. I picked up seats in the Senate. No one's done that since JFK, which, by the way, is actually technically true, but there's a lot of nuance to that, right? And also, it looks like it's all slipping away anyway. He had the biggest ass kicking that a sitting Republican president has had since Nixon. Period. End of story. In the Watergate. That's just a fact. But regardless, that's his style. He's not going to ever say he lost. If he loses in 2020, he's going to just say, 3 million illegal Muslims voted for him, or Middle Easterns or Mexicans or whoever is the racist bigots in chief's target for the day. But he comes out and he does all this stuff, right? He comes out to this, and all it is it's a distraction from the fact that he won, and he does his bullshit spin. But then he drops the real bomb, right? He fires Jeff Sessions. He fires him the day after the midterm elections. He didn't resign. He was fired. And right now, without any approval from the Senate, we have a temporary attorney general. And who is this person? Zaki, do you know?
He's a goon, you know. He basically got Luca Brasi to be his AG. I mean, if we're carrying the mob boss metaphor forward, I mean, this guy has Matthew Whitaker, whose qualifications basically begin and end with the fact that he went on CNN talking about what an illegitimate witch hunt, quote unquote, the Mueller investigation is, and how he would stop it, and this is how he'd stop it, and he's a political hack, right?
Right.
And that's
Sean Hannity is Attorney General right now, essentially, right?
In essence, yeah, you know.
Don't get me started.
Well, I'm coming to you next, sir. You're about to get started, so you're in the bullpen, right?
Okay.
And the thing is that I think that Trump may have outsmarted himself a little bit here because it's such a naked, obvious attempt to do what everyone knows he's trying to do, which is obstruct justice, that I have a feeling this effort will blow up in his face. I don't know how. I can't game it out, but I have to believe that there are many Republicans, even in the Senate, or at least a few, who are going to throw up a few red flags about this. You know, I was actually thinking about this because Mitt Romney just yesterday tweeted that he was critical of this choice, and he said the investigation should conclude. And I thought, you know, that's really interesting because here's Mitt Romney. The next time he's on the ballot, Donald Trump won't be.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing Trump can do to him.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So that was just a random thought that
no.
I mean,
and you mentioned earlier, or somebody did. I'm sorry, forgive me who said it, but it's like I can't. Oh, it was you. You were like, I can't. You know, this is how bad Trump is. I'm defending Jeff Sessions, or however you phrased it. And here we are. You know, in 2012, I fought hard, everything I could do in my little world that I live in to make sure that Mitt Romney did not become the 45th president of the United States. And here I am, like, I take Mitt Romney right now. For 12 years to get this asshole out of office.
Sure.
I mean, it's how bad Trump is.
You know, that actually brings up a question that I asked my boss recently.
Please.
Would it be worth it to you to change history and remove the second Obama term if it meant we could avoid Donald Trump?
You and I are, Chris, I have asked this question myself, and just in private. You wouldn't have known this, to friends, and I have struggled with that. I've given that hours of thought. Very literally, I've stayed up, going as much as historic as Obama's election was, and in some ways even more so his reelection. Would I sacrifice that reelection for Mitt Romney to have been the 45th president and Trump never would have ran? And I still to this day don't have an answer for that. I don't know. That's a hard one, man.
It is.
It's a really hard one because what Trump is doing right now, and just today, our dear Justice Ginsburg collapsed and broke ribs. Do you guys realize that no matter what happens with the Senate, how this all unfolds, he's still going to be at least a net gain of one. He's going to have the Senate. They can still get their judiciary agenda passed. He can put another Supreme Court justice in. Now, granted, I'm thinking more about that dear lady's health and everything, not politics. Want her to be well, but there are serious ramifications if she has to retire, and God forbid something happens to her. Because if Donald Trump replaces her, and Mitch McConnell will get that judge through to become justice, that will fundamentally change the Supreme Court forever. And I have 2 young daughters, and the ramifications of that are it's staggering. Okay, Eric, let's. I'm trying to. There's just so much to talk about, and there's a lot of emotions going on right now. But I want to try to come back to the Trump presidency, what he's doing right now with the midterms, and what specifically is going on with Jeff Sessions. This is opening up a constitutional crisis. Like Zaki said, we have, or he and I agree, that we essentially have a Sean Hannity coming in as AG. Not only is that everything Zaki said is accurate in terms of the things that he has said about the probe, he's on record saying that Russia didn't even hack us, that it didn't happen. Right? I mean, this guy has no business anywhere near this. what is going on with this Sessions firing? Because you look at that press conference yesterday, and it not only was he just unhinged, but everything that happened with Jim, I'm still self-conscious about saying his last name again, Acosta?
Yes, Jim Acosta.
Jim Acosta, right. Thank you. That everything was a president unglued and frightened and angry and lashing out. And I want to get to the specifics of the Acosta thing because there's some really fucked up stuff that happened with Sarah Sanders. But Eric, just help us out understand this. What the hell is going to happen with this Russia probe and Bob Mueller, man? What's going to happen here?
I honestly think he'd be crazy to do anything about it now. I don't think it'd play well for him at all. Even if he's trying to with his base, it probably will. They don't care. But anyone who's still maybe maybe a little on the fence about him, I don't think it would play well with them at all politically. So I don't think.
But don't you think he does? I mean, he kind of said so today. Like he knows you do this to me, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to blame you. I'm going to go after you. I'm going to use the power of the Senate. I'm going to do this. This is a witch hunt. Oh, by the way, here's my new attorney general, a guy that's on record saying that the Russia probe is fake and that Bob Mueller is a witch hunter. I mean, dude, and are we just numb to this? I mean, this is a constitutional crisis. I
think we are numb to it because, well, at least I am, because this is just more come from his playbook. This is what he does. He's not going to pivot. He never will pivot. So this is just something. He says, well, they're coming at me, so this is how I'm going to react. And he reacts like any child would act. And, he does something like appointing a guy like you said to be acting attorney general when you still have the deputy AG there, right? So this is just more of the same from him for me. And I personally don't think he would be wise to try and push on the Mueller probe now. I honestly think he's going to let it go. I think Zaki kind of said the same thing before. He doesn't think that's going to happen either. And I kind of agree with that.
Well, I hope so. Chris, you have any thoughts on this?
It's just
anything in terms of because listen, if Bob Mueller is putting together an obstruction case, Trump firing his attorney general the day after the midterms, because everything to him is a distraction. Mm-hmm. The caravan, which side note, does anybody talk about that? Anybody talk about the caravan for the last 48 hours?
No, in fact, that kind of brings up. There's a YouTube personality that I enjoy watching in the gaming realm. His name is Jim Sterling, and he spoke. He put out a tweet recently about the caravan that I thought was pretty hilarious. And I thought I had it right here. Let me see here.
Well, as you're pulling that up, I tweeted something that just kind of came to mind around me, Kaiser Soze and the usual suspects. Like the election's over, and just like that, it's gone.
Again, this is what Sterling said. He says, "So now the election's over. The immigrant caravan that terrified a nation appears to have returned to the stars from whence it came, never to cause trembling among Americans again, almost as if it was never a real problem and was being used to get votes from idiots." Almost.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, as far as the investigation is concerned.
So basically he's everything about him is distraction, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and I'm not saying that other politicians don't or other presidents don't. Of course they do. And this is what I want to say real fast. And then Chris, just jump in and finish what you were going to say. I am so tired of the false equivalencies about this president. I am so sick of you say something about his fuckery and somebody says, yeah, but Obama lied about keep your doctor, or Bill Clinton got a blowjob and the Oval Office and lied about it. The whataboutisms with this guy, I'm like, you know what? We have to define what a lie means. Obama didn't lie when he said that. There were things that happened with Obamacare that were unfortunate, that certainly did not make that statement age very well. But that's not a deliberate lie. And of course, Obama lied. Of course, he did. Every president does. Every person does. Everybody lies to a certain extent, but you can walk in. Not with impunity, not constantly, not about everything, big and small. This asshole lies about everything, and just we talk about Jim Acosta and that whole exchange. And listen, for the record, that guy's a weasel. He is, but he's a real journalist. And he is doing his job. Is he annoying? Absolutely. He's a beating, but he's also a legit journalist. And they sent out a video of that incident with that reporter that was edited by InfoWars. And Sarah Sanders, the press secretary, tweets that and says, this is why we had to ban him and take his press credentials away, because he manhandled this young woman, or whatever her words were, and sent out a video that was manipulated. And the fact that is not, it's libel, the fact that she still has her job, it just encapsulates everything that's so fucked up about this presidency. Two days after he was elected president, the first thing he did was send out a tweet that said 3 million illegals voted. That's why I lost the popular vote. And that has been his presidency since. Sorry, go. Sir, please. Where did I interrupt you and leave off? I'm sorry. I just got really pissed off about that. And I knew that was...
There's a lot to get angry about, though. I mean,
okay, I'm cool.
That's something that's worth getting angry about, because it's something like that should not be permissible, especially for the press secretary of the United States to basically legitimize a fringe outlet like that. That's almost the worst part of it. It doesn't deserve to be part of the conversation, but it's this climate that allows that to happen. And I share your consternation at that, because it's just it's annoying as shit. I'm sick of it. You're sick of it. Everybody's sick of it. Even people who say that they're not sick of it are probably sick of it because they're always hearing about it.
Right.
Humans and repetition, sometimes they mix, but they usually don't, especially if it's pounding your ears.
Let me just say really quickly to someone who has done video editing in the past, it was a terrible job.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Was it really? I don't. Yeah. I'm not. I'm not savvy in that department. Talk to us.
You see silhouettes, and you can actually tell that they sped up the part where his arm comes down, so it looks like he's actually doing it with force. And if you watch the actual footage, you can see that he just his body kind of took him that direction because she was pulling the microphone. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was really, really bad. I just wanted to put that in. Go ahead, Chris.
No, and the frame rate looked a little bit different too, which is a pretty telltale sign of them speeding footage up. I mean, it's like it's not a good idea, and it's just a stupid thing to do in general. But when it comes to how this is going to affect the investigation, I mean, I'm with Eric. He shouldn't do anything. And kudos to the special counsel investigation. We didn't hear a peep out of it as the debate was kicking up. And certainly as the election was getting closer and closer. That's exactly how you're supposed to conduct yourself. Unlike, I know that people have been kicking James Comey when he's down a lot, but that's a norm that he flouted in 2016 to potentially disastrous results. And the way that you're supposed to conduct these things is in a way that does not interfere with the electoral process. So at least we had that. As far as the future and how this is going to shake out, I read Woodward's book relatively recently, certainly since the last time that we spoke. And it gave me a little bit of insight into not only the way that Mueller seems to be operating, but the way that the president sees the investigation playing out. And he does not, his bravado is, what a shock, a sham. Because every single time that there was a documented instance of the president reacting to something that happened in the Mueller investigation, it's like he folds like a wet blanket in private, and he's terrified of what's going to happen. And because of that, if he understands that the investigation is inching along at a pretty slow pace, but if it's still doing its due diligence, he should not want to kick the hornet's nest. And that's exactly what he would be doing if he kicked up too much of a fuss about it. So I'm going to be really interested to see how it shakes out, but I'm also pretty intrigued by the fact that the investigation has been so quiet over the last couple months. And that tells me, or at least it would indicate to me, I would guess, that it's because they didn't want to drop any bombshells before an election.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I know that CNN put out today. There were a couple of different journalists that tweeted this. That were saying that apparently Bob Mueller is in the final stages of this thing. He's writing his final report. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what was reported.
I mean, and just to follow up, just to back Chris up, and from the beginning, we've all said this. I think if you didn't do anything wrong, let him finish it. It's not going to find anything. So what are you worried about? Right?
Exactly.
Because he did something wrong, and
well,
he's
exactly what I'm saying from his side.
To what extent, I don't know, and how entangled he is, I don't know. But I tell you, it's not good. I know that.
I've heard more than one conservative and Republican over the years say, you know, if you don't have anything to hide, then why are you hiding?
Yeah.
And,
right.
Well, he doesn't seem to be following that train of thought very well.
No. And where there's smoke, there's fire, and where there's fire, there's fire. And there's a lot of fire around. I mean, the guy's his hair's on fire. He walks around like that. He's so obviously compromised. It's laughable. Okay. One thing that we haven't talked about, and one thing that I certainly want us to address is, especially being the proud daddy of 2 daughters, is the female component to all this. Females came out and ran in record numbers, and 115 women won races, and there were 270. Let me look it up here, like 280. Where's it at? Okay, 270. Yeah, 276. 276 were on the ballot, and 115. I think that's what I said. That's right. 115 women were in races. 276 on the ballot, and that's 11 women that won Senate seats and 9 that won gubernatorial races. And it was women in all races. There's a Muslim woman that was elected to Congress as well. That's historic. That's great. But, you know, it's not about the Muslim woman or the Black woman or the Latina woman. All that matters, and I love that. But let's just focus on just the gender as a whole, the totality, and to give credit to Marsha Blackburn. I mean, I'm not a fan, but I don't want to just make it sound like it's because I like liberal women. She deserves credit for winning as well in Tennessee. But it was the night of the woman, and it was the night of the progressive woman. There was a woman, I don't have it in front of me, and I didn't think about it until just now. It just kind of came to me, but in some district in Oklahoma that won, and it's been like a Republican threshold since the 70s. And you know, I'm thinking it's been like all white men the whole time, and a liberal woman won in Oklahoma. I've done business in Oklahoma. I used to oversee a restaurant in Oklahoma City. I actually like the state. I specifically like Oklahoma City, but man. You go to Oklahoma and spend some time and come to Texas. Texas feels like New York.
Was it Kendra Horn? Really? Was it Kendra Horn? Is that the one?
I think that's her name. Yeah. And anyway, it's awesome. Zaki, what are your thoughts on that, man? Like, just, you know, you have a daughter now, you know, and you know, what's your initial thoughts on women, and what does that mean for the future of our electorate?
Well, every action has a reaction, right? And we saw 2 things happen in the last 2 years. Number one, a guy who admitted on tape, a week before an election or a month before an election that, you know, he can grab women by their private areas and nobody can stop him. And then a justice who was credibly accused of sexual assault had his accuser mocked and diminished by the guy who admitted to grabbing women by the genitals. You know, I think that every action, like I said, it has a reaction, and that's what this was. Not to say that all of the women who ran suddenly were motivated by the Kavanaugh thing, but it was essentially what started with the Access Hollywood tape was escalated with the Kavanaugh thing. And I obviously, yeah, sure. Props to Marsha Blackburn. I think she benefited more from geography than gender.
I do as well, honestly.
Right? But I think I think it's very telling that we saw 100+ women, many of them women of color, many of them representing their communities for the very first time in Congress. Most of them were most of them are part of the Democratic caucus. That tells you something about the changing electorate, you know, and it tells you something also about just sort of the lotto ticket that the GOP happened to draw for the Senate map this time.
And that's exactly what it was. They had a Senate map that 2 years ago we knew It just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah,
But
and so right now you've got women who are active, who are activated, and it's about damn time. I think that uh, I think the Trump presidency has made it even more inevitable that we will have a woman president.
yeah, I do too. I was walking my 7-year-old to school the other day, and it's funny because it's hard, right? Obviously, I'm a politically passionate person, and so is my wife, and my wife's like, that's where we hit it off. Like when we met at a weird time. I'm not gonna get too personal here. We met at kind of a weird time in our lives. I'm 5 years older than her, and things were going really well for me in my acting back then. At that moment, I was going to LA, and she had just moved back. She was in Chicago. She went to UT. She grew up here for the most, kind of a back and forth, whatever. But she went to UT and just moved back to Dallas, and it just wasn't right for us. But what we hit it off in two ways. We hit it off with When Harry Met Sally, which is the greatest romantic comedy ever written, and we hit it off with politics. And I knew I was in trouble when that happened too, because I was like, man, I've not ever dated someone that was interested in politics or talked about politics, and or for that matter, felt the same way I do politically. And that's who we are. And our girls are growing up in a household with like two liberal parents. And I joke, I say, I don't want to put my personal views on my kids. One of the main reasons I grew up watching Family Ties, I don't want that shit to backfire. I'll end up with like two Alex P. Keatons running around. They had the hippie parents, and he was that's a real deep cut for you youngsters out there, but that's a Michael J. Fox reference. But anyway, but also I don't want to do it. I want them to come up with their own decisions and make up their own minds about how they feel and how they view the world and who they want to vote for and what have you. But my daughter, my 7-year-old, she's very precocious, right? And she's very curious about why we have never had a girl president ever. And that's what she says, a girl president, right? And she was aware of the last election, and she understands that a woman lost to a man. And when she asked me about this constantly, like why haven't we had a girl president? I've never had a good answer for her. That's a hard thing to answer a 7-year-old little girl who you're sitting there, you're like, your gender has no boundaries. Why haven't we ever had a girl president? Because we're a sexist nation. Sorry, did I say that out loud? Right? You don't know what to say. But Tuesday gave me hope, and it gave me something to tell her. And she didn't quite understand it all, but I can show her pictures. And yes, again, I showed her Marsha Blackburn because, that's how we roll. But it was just an awesome moment. And I showed her the Muslim woman, and we have, and she's growing up in a neighborhood that she has friends that are different cultures. And, we have, and so all that stuff is so cool, but just the fact that as a little girl, she's looking at this and saying, there is hope. And I'm like, yes, we will have a girl president at some point, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, it ties into everything that's been going on with women for a couple of years now, right? Women are getting more empowered. You have the Me Too movement. You have a lot of things going on, and these all kind of come together. And we saw on Tuesday, I think there's just another extension of that. Women are just now becoming more comfortable with being out there and putting themselves out there. And we're seeing, we saw on Tuesday, it was a great day for women.
It was a great day for the country, man.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, it really was. I want to talk a little bit about Beto. All right, because we all talked about stuff locally.
Yes.
But before I do, we've talked about a lot. So I want to make a clean transition here. Chris, do you have any final thoughts on anything that we've discussed at all so far?
Well, there was, I thought that there was kind of an interesting note from Washington State that I thought I'd bring up as far as a congressional result was concerned. So
yeah, please do.
Washington State's 8th congressional district has been held for a number of years by a Republican representative named Dave Reichert. The 8th district was established, I think, in 1973 after I think it was being drawn like after the 70 census, something like that. And it's been represented by a Republican forever. Since its inception, since it started staying on the congressional map. Reichert was actually the sheriff, I think it was of King County, and he was associated with the department for a number of years, and he's actually the guy, the officer that was credited with the capture of Gary Ridgway, who was known in Washington State as the Green River Killer. So Reichert was kind of a rock star in local politics. When he made the transition and he ran for the House, he got in and was elected handily every single time that he ran. He retired this year. He was not on the ballot. So the the candidate that Republicans chose as conceivably a sure thing was a man named Dino Rossi. And Dino Rossi came to relative national prominence because he ran for the governor of Washington State in 2004 against Christine Gregoire. And he lost that election on a third recount by a margin of less than 150 votes. And that made national news, understandably so. But so he lost that race. That's the closest that he's ever gotten to winning an election. He had an appointment to a state Senate seat, but that's really the only elective office that he's ever had anyone elected to it. He tried to run in 2010 against Senator Patty Murray for her seat and lost. And so as Dave Reichert's appointed successor, it looked like he was finally going to ascend to elective office and become a member of the United States House of Representatives. He lost on Tuesday. And it was the first time in the 8th Congressional District's history that it went blue. And I thought that was fascinating because if you've ever heard Rossi talk, he works better than Unisom. If you want to put yourself to sleep, the guy is bland as all hell. And leave it to Washington Republicans who keep putting this guy up, thinking that he's just the best conservative they could possibly get into office. He manages to lose that district, and it flips for the very first time. As soon as I heard that result, I had to stop myself from laughing. I could not believe it because I don't like Dino Rossi. I certainly don't agree with him. I think he's boring as all hell. And it's just amazing to me that such a sure thing that was basically handed to him, he still couldn't bring it home. So thought that was funny. Thought I'd share it.
And he lost to a woman.
On. And he lost to a woman. Exactly.
He lost to a woman. Yes, I have to share that story with my Hadley. Zaki, Eric, real quick. I'm gonna kind of wrap the show up here with the Beto thing. But let me ask you guys a question, and Chris, really everybody. But Zaki, I'll ask you first. Do you have any fears of? How can I phrase this? Actually, let me ask you like this: is the Democratic Party making a mistake by giving Nancy Pelosi the gavel back? And then Eric, I'll ask you, we'll kind of just piggyback here. And no matter how he responds, you can say, what is your biggest concerns about what the Democratic Party could possibly do to muck up this opportunity that they have? So the floor is yours, gentlemen.
No, I don't think it's a mistake. And I think if anything, it's a mistake to fall for the sort of the right-wing noise machine that talks about how unpopular she is or how terrible she is or whatever. I mean, it's like Brer Rabbit saying, don't throw me in the briar patch. You know, I think Nancy Pelosi, when she was Speaker Pelosi, she got things done. She has been a far more effective Speaker of the House than the two Republican speakers who followed her, and the various Republican speakers who preceded her. I mean, it's preposterous. Look at what a joke of a speaker Paul Ryan has been, and then you're gonna get on a high horse and talk about how awful Nancy Pelosi is. The truth is, if not for her, the Affordable Care Act would not exist. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
And she's going to help keep it in place because that thing is not repealed. They've taken away a couple of things, but it's the law. And
one other small thing too, because I know that this is kind of a microcosm, but Dave Bratt, who's famous in the Virginia 7th for primarying Eric Cantor, there was that video that was released during a debate with his opponent Abigail Spanberger. He kept referring to her as Nancy Pelosi, thinking that this inextricable tie that he was trying to establish in his rhetoric was somehow going to, just reemphasize his win on Tuesday. He lost. He lost to Abigail Spanberger, and I just thought that was wonderful. But you brought up the supposed massive level of unpopularity of Nancy Pelosi. It's kind of hard to not think that might have backfired on him. But I thought that was kind of an interesting.
I think it did, and I think the fact of the matter is that as it pertains to the Democratic caucus, they really want somebody like her in charge right now. Now, there's been talk that she'll serve in more of a transitional role and segue to somebody else. I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll see. I'm open to whatever, but I think the idea of reflexively being anti-Pelosi, when you look at the record of accomplishments she had while serving as Speaker, I think it's preposterous. I think that you want somebody who has been tested, who knows the ins and outs of these political battles, because I think the Democrats right now, what they really need to be wary of is sort of going out too far ahead of their own skis. And we have a template in front of us where we saw what the Republicans did going after Clinton, and they only made him more popular. And I think Pelosi is somebody, having lived through those battles, knows the best way to use the power of congressional oversight in a way that gives the appearance that it's functional and not vengeful.
You think they're going to get anything done, Zaki? You think they're going to pass legislation together? Infrastructure, legalize pot, whatever?
I don't think they'll pass anything together, but I think what you're going to see is a lot of popular and politically untenable for Republicans bills originate in the House that then they will have to own not doing anything with. And I think that's what we're going to see over the next couple of years. I mean, it'll be. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. It'll be like the inverse opposite of like the 60 Obamacare repeal things that the Republicans did, knowing they didn't have the Senate. It's going to be the inverse of that. It's going to be, look, here's a popular thing that expands background checks. Republicans do nothing with. Here's a popular thing that does this. Republicans will do nothing with. It's going to be in a lot of ways a worst case scenario for Republicans who are up for election in 2 years.
Very well stated. Eric, do you have any concerns? Do you think that, because listen, I'm of two minds on Nancy Pelosi. Okay. Everything Zaki said is true. She is a tour de force behind closed doors too. I get nervous sometimes because I know she's so contentious, but at the same time, everybody is now because we're so tribal. If there's blue and red team and that's it, and they hate each other. So, she's effective. I sometimes wish, and it's not. I'm not basing this off I'm not an age bigot here, right? But I do want some young, fresh blood to step up. That's exciting. That inspires young people to vote. I also want Joe Biden to be the Democratic nominee. So wrap your head around that contradiction. Okay, so, but. What are your thoughts, man? Are you concerned about anything with Democrats taking the House? They have a great opportunity here. What are your hopes? What are your fears?
Well, I don't want them to do what Democrats normally do, which is like, okay, yeah, we won, and then ease off a little bit. I think they have an opportunity now. They have a lot, like we said, with the young people, with the women, you have a lot of new, different voices, younger voices in the Democratic Party that they need to continue to push forward and be the progressive party they speak to all the time and speak to that they are. With regards to Pelosi herself, I kind of echo how you feel. I'm kind of with you on this one, Rick, that yes, I think for where we are now, she's probably the right person to take the gavel and into the new Congress. My personal feeling is I would prefer, and again, I'm not an ageist either, but I prefer to have someone younger, just because that seems to be the way the country is going. But as for right now, she's probably the right person for the job. And I didn't even think of it until Zaki actually just said his point so eloquently. Because I was totally like, no, I want her out, but he just kind of convinced me that she's probably the right person for the job right now.
My buddy Jeremy Leva at Jew Gravy on his Twitter. He's a riot. He's a riot. You got to meet him in person, dude. He's a trip. He's an REM tribute band in LA. He's nice. Great. Yeah, the guy's great. But anyway, I texted him earlier and I was like, can you please make me, a meme or whatever with Nancy Pelosi as Speaker at a State of the Union with Trump and Pence, and he sent it over to me. And I've already been trolling people on Twitter with it. And I was looking at it, and it's very well done. I sent it to you guys. I mean, right? It's probably took him 10 seconds to do it, but I was like, I kind of like the image of that. Like there's something about it that's it's a really strong trolling image. He's been shitting on her for 2 years, and she's about to be Speaker of the House. Pretty crazy. Third most powerful person in the country. I mean, that's nuts. And you think about her career too. She's when her story is told and her book is written, she will have been sitting behind at least 3 presidents, if not maybe 4.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Bush, Obama, Trump. That's a remarkable career.
Yeah.
But I have my concerns. In talking about the Democratic Party in general and where we stand, and I say we. For the record, guys, I'm a registered Democrat for one reason and one reason only, because in Texas I have to be to vote in the primaries. Otherwise, I would not be. I don't like the party affiliation. I don't like the 2-party system. It sucks. Quite frankly, I think the DNC are hacks, and I think that in the post-Obama era, the Democrats haven't been able to find their way. We might actually finally be finding our footing. And I wanted to kind of close with the show with Beto O'Rourke. And let me ask you guys, we're Chicago, we're New York, we're San Francisco. I know that he piqued a lot of interest on the national level. I mean, he was on Ellen. It was everywhere. Obviously here, it resonated with me in a different way than it does with you guys. But just in general, like just anybody, just jump in. How did you guys feel about that race and him? Like Zaki, Chris, did you guys feel like that man, this candidate's exciting. This is the future of a Democratic Party. This could change Texas. We need him in the Senate or whatever. I don't know. He skateboards and he used to be a punk rocker, and I don't really care. What were your thoughts?
Well, I'm very impressed with him, just to put it lightly. I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Rick. I don't necessarily have allegiance to a party. I have allegiance to ideas. And it just so happens that the ideas that I believe in are also ideas shared by a lot of Democrats. So that's why I tend to throw in with them more than I throw in with Republicans or libertarians or whatever you want to bring up.
Libertarians or Republicans that drugs, sir. That's all.
Hey, you're not going to get any argument from me.
That's all. And all my libertarian friends out there that might be listening, it's true. You're a Republican that just wants pot legal.
If we had more time, I would tell you about the libertarian that ran for governor here. But, oh man! But when it comes to Beto O'Rourke, first of all, he has a leg up automatically just because of who he's running against. And I'm not just saying that as someone who has a polar opposite ideology from Ted Cruz, but Ted Cruz is just simply extraordinarily unlikable. I don't know if I've ever encountered a politician as unlikable who managed to break onto the national stage as Ted Cruz. So...
And he did so in Bush country, man. This is a Bush state. I mean, George Bush lives very literally 22 minutes from my house. And I can tell you that because I don't know exactly his address, but I know where he lives. And he lives very close to SMU, which is 22 minutes from my house.
Well, and that's the thing. Like I was watching during the returns the other night, they broke away a few times to the Cruz headquarters. And I saw a guy decked out in a Cruz shirt with a Cruz sign. And I think he had a Cruz hat on. And I'm like, what kind of person do you have to be excited about the wet blanket that is Ted Cruz? Like, I have no idea. I don't think
a tribal Republican in Texas, especially in the era of Trump.
I guess so. But beyond that, I mean, so looking at that race automatically, I'm probably going to be more excited about his opponent, A, because his ideology is probably going to be closer to mine, and B, because Ted Cruz is so unlikable. But then, you pay attention to what Congressman O'Rourke was saying on the campaign trail. You pay attention to the time of day that he gives to people who don't agree with him, and he treats them with civility, but also stands his ground. The initiatives that he supported as a congressman, the ideas that he has decided to share, and as someone who doesn't seem to have a lot of love lost for the institution of the Democratic Party, but who does believe in a set of ideas that he ran with, which I'm sure a lot of people in Texas were telling him would be a bad idea. Don't talk about this. Don't talk about that. And he talked about it all. And he came pretty damn close to winning. So that tells me that not only do I feel inspiration about what his candidacy meant for Texas, but also potentially what it could mean for the country if he chooses to go a little bit further. But it also shows that his ideas have staying power. And so I don't know if he's the anointed leader. I mean, I think most people who believe in liberal democracy tend to chafe at the idea of trying to put all of our beliefs and hopes and dreams on the shoulders of one person. That's not how it works. But if someone could be a standard bearer for a set of ideas to make us see the best parts of ourselves, does he have that potential, including with his history and his story of reaching new heights in his own life and what he's decided to do with himself? Hell yes. I think that he has that potential. Absolutely. If he announced that he was going to consider running for president, I would support him in a heartbeat over everyone else that is on the field right now.
Zaki, what do you think? I know that you were obviously invested in him winning. We all were as progressives. Just it was the only chance we had to take back the Senate, or at least hold the Senate, keep him from getting 60 seats. But I felt like that. I know you well enough at this point. I feel like that maybe, and just correct me if I'm wrong here, I feel like that maybe you were, dare I say, kind of a fan of Beto O'Rourke. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that he had an Obama touch, and that's not something that you see very often in politics. He I mean, it's all been said already, so I feel like I'm just reiterating a lot of he had a transformative mien about him. And I don't think this is the last we'll see of him. I will say, I mean, he was always going to be a long shot in Texas. And, obviously there's that old chestnut, right? Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. And I think a lot of people did fall in love with Beto O'Rourke. And so there was that disappointment, especially as the voting got so close, but given the choice between having Beto O'Rourke in the Senate and having Democrats in control of the House, I mean, that's a very easy choice to make, right? I think we'll see him again. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off before you say something.
No, please do.
I think that he is the kind, if not him specifically, he is the kind of candidate that we need to have in 2020. I know that you've got Avenatti out there saying you've got to get somebody who, if Trump is making low blows, we need somebody who's going to kick people in the balls, and I just fundamentally disagree with that. I think that approach, that mentality isn't going to work, because there's no point trying to out dirty Donald Trump, because we're all going to be like pigs and shit at that point,
Right, and he doesn't mind getting dirty. And by the way,
we need a contrast. We need somebody who can remind us of our better angels. And politics is about voting against somebody, but that's not all it's about. People are desperate to be inspired, and I don't think you can undersell just how inspirational and aspirational Barack Obama was in 2008. I mean, obviously, whether he lived up to those aspirations that he inspired, I mean, that's a separate question. But people wanted to believe, and I think people still want to believe. And motivation comes down to hope and fear. Trump is all about fear. And I think whoever runs against him needs to be about hope.
Well, can I piggyback on something that he said?
Yeah, please.
Because I think that when it comes to the hindsight look at President Obama's legacy, we did put a lot of, by we I mean progressives in general, and America at large probably put a lot of pressure on his shoulders. Whether or not he lived up to it, is that his fault or is that ours? for trying to look at a human politician as being a Kryptonian politician. You know, I mean, it's just like, I think that, you know, you have a segment of the electorate that are just coming of age right now who grew up in the age of Obama, let's say. And I know that a lot of those people were extraordinarily disappointed and crestfallen by what happened in 2016. And that's why a lot of them had a fire lit under their ass and came to vote in the midterms. But, you know, you have to, the politics is pragmatism. You are never going to find someone perfect. You have to find people who are as close to what you want to see in your government as possible. And when it comes to O'Rourke,
Chris, you know, I sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No.
Somebody summed it up so perfectly online. Your vote is a chess move, not a Valentine.
Exactly. That is very perfectly said. And when it comes to O'Rourke, especially in the age of post-Obama, where you have a degree of, or you have an element of the citizenry who understand that, or who are at least starting to understand a little bit more the pragmatism that has to come with participating in the process. I'm not sure if we would necessarily look at someone like Beto O'Rourke if he chose to run for president and put the same kind of pressure on him. Some people would, but going from Trump to, or I'm sorry, going from President Obama to President Trump is such a staggering difference that there has to be a degree of pragmatism that comes out of that and understanding of political realities. And O'Rourke, if he chose to run for president, I absolutely believe can be a symbolic step up, but we need not be obsessed with trying to find some sort of political messiah. It's not going to happen, but if he's the best man for the job, then he should do it.
And you know, that's very well said. I worked diligently. I was a delegate for the 2008 primary for Hillary Clinton. I was actually against Obama. I mean, I fell right in line the moment that he won the nomination because I liked him, but I was a Hillary guy. And part of why I didn't let some of his letdowns, because he was a little bit of a heartbreaker, right? I mean, there were times where we were all kind of kicked in the nuts by Obama, but I never had him on that kind of pedestal. And I never had him as a messiah.
Well, also,
and I fought against him. And so when he made mistakes, I'm like, I was expecting that. He's flawed. He's a little naivete, he's et cetera, et cetera. But man, I don't regret him getting the nomination. I don't regret him becoming president. I don't regret my vote or my second vote. I wouldn't change it for anything.
And I think you just answered the question that I asked earlier about whether or not it was worth it.
You know what?
Very well, you might have done it.
Fuck it. Fuck it. It was worth it. It was worth it. Trump, you know what? Because maybe Trump is bringing out the worst in us, but maybe he will also ultimately be he's the final chapter, and white nationalism, racism, bigotry, all of it. Maybe that's the case. Eric, let me ask you a quick question because Chris talked about, because we probably do need to wrap this up because we're at an hour and a half and I don't want it to go too much longer for our listeners here. But he said going from, you know, Obama to Trump was, and Chris, how did you phrase it? I don't want to butcher how you said it.
It was just it's a staggering and startling difference.
Okay, yeah. I thought that way with Obama from Bush. And then everything's relative, right? It's all about perspective here.
Yeah, right.
This Obama and Bush are like twin brothers to me right now compared to this maniac. So Eric,
they act like it too, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, they're partners in crime according to Michelle Obama. You know,
yeah.
I don't even really know where I'm going with this. I guess sometimes it just still blows my mind that Trump is president and he's also president after Obama. It's the tale of two Americas. I mean, it really is.
Well, I will say this, going back to Beto O'Rourke, I do think, to use a Hollywood term, he's kind of box office, right? Like you kind of nationally, when people hear his name, they turn their head and they watch. So I think you need someone like that to go up against Donald Trump, because that's what Donald Trump is, right? So you need someone, I'm not saying you need someone to be like him because nobody wants that, but you need someone to be able to go toe to toe with Donald Trump and be able to have the same magnetism that he has.
And magnetism, and what Zaki said, and to have this dichotomy where he's hope and Trump is fear.
Right. Yeah. So I think with regards to him going forward, if he wants to, because he said right away, I'm not running for president. He said it immediately. But we know how those things can change. So, but if he wants to, I think he is the type of candidate the Democratic Party needs. He's young and he's box office and people listen to him. So
I agree. I still want Joe Biden as a nominee, and that's a whole 20-minute conversation. And it's a strategic. It's a strategic thing. I mean, it really is. And I want Joaquin Castro as his VP, and he's a Texan, and we can talk about that. But I wanted to wrap this up for me on this end, because to talk about Texas real quick for 20 seconds, because I talked about the Dallas precinct with Pete Sessions. We talked about O'Rourke, but there was a lot of things that happened in my state that were quite remarkable. And I've been saying for a long time that Texas is going to become purple. I've never said blue, and maybe I have, vote Texas blue or whatever, just because it's a hashtag. But the reality is I want it to be a swing state. And quite frankly, I kind of like the idea of a swing state versus a deep blue state. I still like that challenge, and I like the pull of ideas. I think it can be healthy, right? And what I'm looking for in my state is I look around and I sometimes get in this bubble because I live in Dallas. I spend a lot of time in Austin. I've done a lot of business down in Houston and even San Antonio for that matter. That's great. Urban, liberal, Bill Maher or Jon Stewart or whoever that tours and has done comedy shows or just give me a quote unquote liberal comedian. Just naming names here, just to name names. They sell out in these cities, like major venues. They don't sell out in Amarillo. They don't sell out in, maybe they do in El Paso. I don't know. But the state is so big. And so I have to keep that in perspective. Like, yeah, these cities are changing, but it's still this big, vast nothing of Republican threshold. And then this comes around, this election, and Senate seats and it's remarkable what has happened in Texas and this election. And when I told all my friends, I said, I want Beto to lose around like 5%, for Cruz to win, but in like that 5% range, because that'll be very telling, right? That's like a sign of things that are changing. He's not going to win. He's not really going to get close, because you can be 4 or 5% in a state of this size and still like lose by, and this math might not be quite right, but you could still probably lose by 1 million votes and it'd still be like 4 or 5%. Chris, does that sound about right to you math wise? I mean, yeah, just kind of pulling that out of my ass really. But I mean, that's probably relatively accurate, which is mind blowing, right? And then for the results to come in, and I will never forget this as long as I live, because it's a moment where my state changed. I knew my city changed many years ago. I knew Austin changed even many years before that. And I knew Houston was changing. But to watch those counties turn blue, and I talked about Tarrant County at the top of the show, and to watch 71% of the vote come in, and Zaki, you and I were texting about this, and Beto was ahead at 71%. And I remember thinking, he is going to pull this off. Oh my God. So it's very deflating that it ultimately didn't quite happen. I think Cruz ended up winning about, 2 or 3 points, which is insane, by the way. But it almost would have been easier for me if Beto would have lost a little bit bigger margins, but still in the margins I wanted him to, because I didn't expect to really actually be disappointed, because at that 71%, when he was ahead, that 35, 40 seconds, that window, I was on a high like I've never been in my life ever. I just, other than maybe my kids being born, right? I mean, I'm serious. I was in tears going, my state is about to do this. And it didn't quite happen. But to me, it's not just about Texas. It's not about Beto necessarily. It's about a change that's happening, that's inevitable across the country. And the hardcore, ardent Trump supporters and Trump himself, they're holding on so desperately. It's why it's so volatile right now, guys. It's so volatile because so many people, mainly white, sorry, this is just a fact, over 45 white people, mainly even, I don't know if I can say mainly male, because unfortunately, older white women aren't doing us a lot of favors right now either, but they're holding on to that America that they used to think that what America was all about. And the fact of the matter is I'm sorry, that's not really America. It never really was America, and it shouldn't be America, and it's certainly not going to be. And they're holding on to it. And I think that's where a lot of this anger is coming from. And I look at something like what happened in Texas, and you look at the breakdown, and Texans are scared because they're like, man, what is going on with my state? What's going on with your state? It's browner. It's more multicultural. It's not just Christian. It's Muslim. It's Jew. It's atheist. It's everything. And that's what excites me. As I look at what happened with the Beto race, even though he fell short, as just this representation of our better angels and who we really are as a people. And for the older white Christian, nothing wrong with an old white Christian, by the way, nothing. I'm not saying that, but this is not your country. It's ours. It's everybody. And there's people, we're on this panel right now. This is an all male panel. Not that was planned, but just kind of happened that way. But we obviously have different races. We have different religions. We're from different places geographically, and that is America. And does everybody agree that is sort of the sad thing about this Republican Party, this Trump party, is that is their party. It's a base party. It's a white party. It's an over 45, 50 party. And that's all it is. And they're holding on to that. And that's where does everybody agree with that? Like, that's what this fight is really all about. Right?
Yeah.
This is make America white again. This isn't make America great again.
Yeah, no, I mean I hate using the word Republican with Trump because I grew up, my family is pretty much all Republican, and this is not the Republican Party I remember. So I mean, I hate using that term for them. I call them Trumpies, which is probably not nice, but that's what I call them, Trumpies. But you're right. No, there is this one faction of, and it's usually white people, like you said, older white people who just are afraid that if they let different things happen, the country's going to fall apart or their lives are going to be terrible. And I guess living in New York, in a place where I've always been surrounded by diversity and a lot of different kinds of cultures and stuff, I don't see it that way. But hey, if you live in a place where you only see white people and you're only around white people and that's what you see all the time and things start to come in, you get a little afraid and you want to hold on to that. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I think Tuesday clearly showed we're headed in a different direction, and you're either going to have to get on the train or you're going to be left behind.
That's right. All right, we're going to do some plugs here, but before we do, Zaki, Chris, any just final thoughts on everything? And by the way, sorry I took up so much airtime with my little rant there. I didn't plan on that. It just I got a lot on my mind, and this is it's been a tough few days, and it's also been a great few days at the same time. I do want to come back to the top of the show, and I'm nervous about, we're not talking enough about gun violence, and it's not something that that candidates talked about a lot. So we'll see what happens with that. All right, Chris, any final thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been. I remember this was probably about 12 years ago, 13 years ago. One of the most hopeless days I've ever had was when I learned about the existence of the Westboro Baptist Church. Pretty understandable why, I think. I don't think I need to really expound on why that was so disheartening. But I had a similarly hopeless day when I truly started to understand what the alt-right was, because it was even more threatening in a lot of ways because of how tied they try to be to some semblance of American identity. Like, they're trying to take the country for themselves, and they have a vision of the country that is extraordinarily short-sighted. It dehumanizes entire swaths of people, and it believes in things that are antithetical to American ideals and, the tenets of American democracy, and embracing authoritarianism, to say nothing of their embracing of literal Nazi ideals. It was a bad day when I found out that existed. It was a worse day, though, when I found out that it was actually starting to leak in, even if it was on a drip, to mainstream right-wing politics. Because I, as naive as it was to think that Republicans in general would see through those kinds of politics, and that they, at their heart, they believe in the same things that everyone else believes in, as far as the institutions of democracy and freedom of the press and individual expression and liberty for all. How could such an invasive virus infect the Republican Party? But that's what's happened. And it's obviously not all Republicans can be identified as members of the alt-right. Probably not even 30% of all Republicans can't be. But the fact
there's still far too many, and Iowans did reelect Steve King, by the way.
Yes, exactly.
That's still a big black eye on that night.
And that's why it's so important to hold true to trying to represent the best of American ideals, American politics, and American institutions. It's infected the right wing of American politics far too much. It's become permissible under this president because of the kinds of ideas that he's spouting, because of his refusal to condemn literal Nazis, especially when a woman was killed as a result. That Charlottesville incident was a really disheartening day to be an American, to see how things had changed and how things had devolved in a certain way. That ideology is something that I stand firmly against. At the end of the day, I'm firmly against anything that dehumanizes people. You cannot do that. To deny someone's basic humanity for superficial differences like skin color or even cultural differences. At the end of the day, we have an American culture, and an American culture is it's not homogenized. There are a lot of different subsets to American culture. And as long as everybody's playing by the rules, as long as everybody's not hurting themselves or someone else, then those cultures need to be protected, but they also need to be celebrated. We do it. And I know that, right wingers, or a certain segment of right wingers, particularly alt-right wingers, they love to lambast SJWs for saying diversity is our strength, but it is. It's something that would be right at home on a podcast that Zaki and I are on when it comes to Star Trek. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations is something to celebrate.
Fuck you, Tucker Carlson.
Anyway. Yeah, screw that guy. But but
don't show up at his house and bother him there, please.
Yeah, don't
do that. Terrible, not helping. Don't do that.
Infinite diversity and infinite combinations does lend to the strength of the United States. We are a melting pot, and we always will be when we're at our best. It's never about single race, single religion, single color. All that shit can go to hell. We're the United States of America, and we have multicultural. We will embrace multiculturalism. And that's the hill that we should die on, because it validates everyone's humanity, everyone's right to exist, and everyone's right to strive for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
It's very Bill Pullman Independence Day. So yes, very good.
I don't know if Zaki and Eric are going to disagree with me. I think that is a perfect place to end this show. That was fantastic. So I want to do some plugs, but Zaki, I do actually have one more question. I want to put it in your lap. It's a really important one. As a certified Rotten Tomatoes movie critic, have you been able to go in and alter the audience score of The Last Jedi yet? Just curious. Well, actually, I guess that wouldn't matter, right? Because that's the audience score. I didn't think that. I didn't think that through very well. Sorry.
One thing I will say is it boggles my mind how that movie can still promote such spirited discussion. I made an offhand post about it on my Facebook wall yesterday, and at last count of an hour ago, there were 450 some comments. People got opinions, but I got to say, I'm a little tired of the hashtag not my Luke crowd. I think.
And by the way, those are all mega crowds anyway. I mean, really, most of them are.
Yeah, there's that Venn diagram has a lot of overlap.
There's a lot of overlap. Well, listen.
Wait. Zaki, this is Mickey M. Huh? I have to try and stay anonymous, but I just wanted you to know. Your check is in the mail.
I don't know what's going on right now, but it's awesome.
Yeah. That was Mickey telling me my Disney money is in the mail. Rotten Tomatoes.
Thank you, but I'm not Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, we're all Disney shells. That's right. All of us are. I mean, I'm still waiting on my check from both Disney for loving The Last Jedi and for George Soros for advocating for. All the things I do, my liberal agenda. But I will say this to the anti-George Soros, that liberals steal elections and fake votes and illegal immigrants. It's all true. It is. But we learned a big lesson in 2016, okay? The 2020 election, the army that we have, the army of 3 million illegal voters that are going to go out and flip a vote for us, we fucked up last time. We sent them all to California. Don't know why. We were going to win the electoral. We're going to win that state anyway. We're going to send those cats to swing states. So watch out. Our army of illegals are going to Ohio, Wisconsin, etc. Just want to get that on.
I'm driving the caravan.
And you're driving the caravan with the MS-13 and the Middle Easterns and whatever else. Jesus Christ. Anyway, Zaki, let's wrap this thing up, man, and give us a plug. Where can we find you? What are you up to?
Well, you can go to my website, zakiscorner.com. That's ZAKIS corner. That's also my Twitter. And got lots of, Rick, there's always fun stuff going on my Twitter. Really interesting conversations. I also want to drop a plug for a piece I just wrote for Birth Movies Death, which posted yesterday, where I find a way to say something nice about Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. And I had fun writing that. I hope people will enjoy reading that.
Oh, so I'm all over that. I didn't know you wrote that. So I see that you're doing a podcast with my buddy Mario at Reviews of Fans.
He reached out to me just today, and he said, "Hey, you want to talk about Superman with me?"
Beautiful.
And what am I? You got to twist my arm for that. Any chance I have.
He's a good dude. It's
very good dude.
Very talented guy. And I like I like Aaron Virola as well. He's done some stuff with me from Fanboy Garage, which is an offshoot of Bridge of the Fans. They're great. So good luck on that. And I know that I love talking Superman with you, because when I did the Superman podcast, you were the first person I reached out to. And I know Chris is a huge Superman fan, and we still need to do some Superman comic stuff. I'm completely down with that. But Chris, you have a million things going on.
Chris, don't we have a Superman thing in the pipeline possibly?
Could be happening.
Maybe.
Could be happening with me, with Zaki, and with a guy that should be known to BOF people, a man named John Beerley.
Okay.
We're looking into something a little bit more regularly concerning the Man of Steel.
There we go.
Cool
so
stuff.
for you guys listening, as I hope you know, Left Shoe Politics, it's a play on my last name, but it's an equal. It's me. It's Jeremy Grockley. He's Jeremy Thomas Grockley because his initials are JT, right? And then Michael Malloy. That's us, and they are not. This is not really in their wheelhouse, the comic book superhero stuff. So you're only going to get these references when I'm hosting a show. So just if you don't like this, you can tune me out when I'm hosting. If you dig it, just know it's always going to be there. Especially when I'm bringing on my nerd family here. This is how we all met. Politics was sort of secondary. Our Batman, Superman stuff.
Yeah.
Star Wars was. Hell, Zaki and I have done a podcast on Rocky franchise.
Yeah, well, I hope we're going to do another one when Creed 2 comes out.
We are going to do another when Creed 2 comes out. So you can just Google Rick Shew and Zaki Hasan Rocky, and you'll find it on iTunes.
I'll be the dissenting opinion.
Yeah, there you go. But Chris, so plug something, man. I know you've got a million things going on. What's going on with you?
Yeah, so every week at movies.com, I have a column called Comics on Film where it talks about comics on film. So if you're interested in either of those things and the intersection between them, then check out movies.com every Friday and you'll find something that I'm talking about. I also have 2 current podcasts. One is called Comics on Consoles, which talks about the intersection between comics and video games. Most recent episode of that went up in September concerning Spider-Man's 2000 video game effort. And I had a really great discussion with 3 big Spider-Man fans who are also pretty prominent members of the comics gaming community. So you should check that out. And the other podcast is with Zaki called Discovery Debrief, a Star Trek podcast where we talk about the latest entry in the final frontier, Star Trek Discovery. And we're gearing up to record a couple of different episodes for that because there are some Star Trek shorts that are being released through the CBS streaming service under the Star Trek umbrella. So we're going to watch those and talk about it. And we've been doing a couple of episodes about just all of our all-time favorite Star Trek episodes. And Zaki's episode went up pretty recently, and you can check that out at just discoverydebrief.com. I've also been, I have a new personal website just called bychrisclow.com, bychrisclow.com. And I'm just basically using it as a work as a work archive. And I'm going to start blogging there too, just for fun, to keep my fingers on the keyboard. And might have a Superman podcast in the works. It should be pretty fun.
Awesome. Big fan of everything you and Zaki both do, brother.
Thank you.
Eric Holzmann.
Yes.
What you got going on, buddy, other than getting people up in New York elected?
Yeah, now that's, I mean, my creative side was put on hold a little bit during the election, so I was very busy with that. But I have recently, as today actually, it's live now, I did my review on Batman on Film for the 4th episode of the Titan series on the DC Universe app. So if any of you guys are interested in that, you can check me out there. And you can also hit me up on Twitter at Finally33.
And tell us about Man Up.
Okay, Man Up is a show that I was doing. It's been on a hiatus for a little while. My co-host had some things going on with his life, and he had to step away from it. But it is a show that I was doing. It is a sports and pop culture related show. I try to include, as Rick knows, and you guys probably know too, I am a big sports fan. So I try and get that part of my life done on Man Up. And then I talk about other stuff like the comic book movies and other interests on the show. And it was a passion project of mine. And I can't wait to start doing it again. But yeah, right now we're still on a little bit of a break. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go with it.
Well, you're very good at it. And as a fellow sports fan, I love it. And,
thank you.
And my Dallas Cowboys suck. Anyway, so listen, I know this was a loaded show. We're at 2 hours. Sorry. I appreciate you guys all sticking with us. I always try to keep these things about an hour and 20, but it was a lot to discuss. And it goes to 2 things here, right? We need to be doing more podcasts. Jeremy and Michael talk about all the time, and it's kind of becoming a broken record, I know. But it's also with what's happened in the last 3 days. My God, this could be a 10-hour show. So Anyway, I hope everyone enjoyed it. Our podcasts are available via iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and really anywhere great podcasts can be found. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and our Twitter handle is at Left Shoe Politic. We were not politics because we ran out of characters. And follow us on YouTube. We're trying to build a little bit of a YouTube audience. We do our podcast there. We post some random videos. Just please subscribe to us. I'd like to build that up a little bit. So on behalf of myself, Rick Shew, and Jeremy Grockley and Michael Malloy, we appreciate all your support. Thank you to my friends and my guest here. And Chris, now that you've been on a Left Shoe show, I can say that you're all 3 returning guests, which is awesome.
That's great.
And I think this is a perfect time to have announcer Rachel take us out.
Thanks for listening to this episode of our Left Shoe Politics podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Left Shoe Politics. Follow the Facebook page at facebook.com/Left Shoe Politics and the LSP website, leftshoepolitics.com. Search for our channel on YouTube, Stitcher, and Google Play.